Today we're going to learn about active versus passive voice. And by the end of this video, you should be able to both identify and write active and passive voice sentences. But first, we're going to try out a little bit of inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning, as opposed to deductive, is when we draw a conclusion based on observations or patterns. So I have provided a pattern here for you, and I would like you to tell me what is going on with these right versus wrong sentences. What do the right ones have in common? What do the wrong ones have in common? Go ahead and pause the video just for a moment, long enough to take a look at each set and tell me what is going on or what patterns emerge and what they mean. Are you ready to see the answers? Here we go. The pattern is that all of the right sentences are in active voice and the wrong sentences are in passive voice. All of the right sentences have SVO word order. In other words, they go in order of subject, then verb, then object. The subject is doing the action. For example, in sentence 1, Chris ate the pizza. Chris, the subject, is doing the verb of eating. What is he eating? Pizza. The pizza is the thing being eaten, so it's receiving the action. This is SVO word order. Same thing with number 2. We survived the zombie apocalypse. Number 3. I bounced a basketball. I'm doing the action. What did I bounce? A basketball. Number 4. He drove the yellow car. And where and how did he drive it? Quickly down the highway. Now, number 5 is an example of a compound predicate. We, subject, are going to do 2 separate things. Chugged 10 energy drinks and went to the hospital. In each of these, the subject is doing the action and the subject comes first. In all the wrong sentences, the word order has been flipped around. The wrong sentences have OVS word order, object, verb, subject. It's the opposite. Now, the object is doing the action. The subject has either moved to the end of the sentence or is now missing completely or is vague. That's passive voice, and in most writing situations, we don't want this, which we'll find out in a minute. For example, if I flip-flop number 1 and move Chris to the end and the pizza up front, now I'm saying the pizza was eaten by Chris. It still has all the needed parts to be a complete sentence, so it's still complete. It's just an awkward word order and is more formal and less direct. And the subject isn't doing the action anymore. The subject has been removed from the emphasis. If I flip-flop number 2, the zombie apocalypse was survived by us. Doesn't that sound weird? Passive voice often sounds weird. Number 3, the basketball was bounced by me. Who talks like that? I know very few people who would willingly do that in average common dialogue. The yellow car was driven quickly down the highway. Notice how in number 4, I don't even have a subject anymore. I don't know who is doing the driving. So the object has been given all the emphasis and the sentence has lost clarity, and that's a problem. For 5, 10 energy drinks were chugged, and to the hospital we were taken. Now that starts to sound like Yoda, but that's a whole other story. All of these wrong sentences are passive. So let's clarify that pattern one more time. Active voice is when the subject of the sentence is performing the action. Active voice sentences are usually shorter and more direct. And active voice sometimes uses stronger verbs. So active voice is more likely to have a good action verb like jump, play, dance, sing, or something like that. Active voice is used in non-scientific writing. It's used on standardized tests like the ACT and SAT in the United States. And actually, most modern-day dialogue and most real-life speech is all active voice. This is our default, and this is how most people speak. Passive voice, on the other hand, I put in cursive because it's more old school. This is when the object of the sentence is performing the action or getting the emphasis. Passive voice sentences are usually longer and less direct, as we saw in some of the previous examples. It often uses being verbs as opposed to action verbs. And those being verbs are is, am, are, was, were, be, being, been. Passive voice often includes the word by to clarify who the subject is or who's doing the action. So if you think about these last sentences, the zombie apocalypse was survived by us. So in this case, the word by is clarifying the subject. But notice that passive voice might often use the word by, but don't confuse it with the prepositional phrases in sentences that start with by. Sometimes by clarifies the subject, like in passive voice, and sometimes the word by just clarifies a prepositional phrase or starts a prepositional phrase. Sometimes it's a location word. Look at this example. Passive voice would be to say, it was eaten by the dog. So see, the dog is doing the action of eating, and it's just at the end of a sentence. But if I say it was eaten by the park is just the location where the thing got eaten. The park is not doing the eating. In this case, the word by is triggering a prepositional phrase, by the park, just for location. So just because you see the word by does not mean that you should just automatically call it passive voice. Passive is often used in political writing. It's used in certain types of science or scientific or technical writing. It's used when being verbs can't be avoided, and also by Yoda. Let's try out some practice now. In each sentence, I'd like you to read it and try to identify each one as either active or passive. We're going to try to label them all. Number 1, she begged her dad to let her drive. She is the subject doing the action of begging, so this is active. Number 2, all the houses in the neighborhood were robbed by the same man. The houses were robbed by a person. This could be rearranged, so we're going to call it passive. Number 3, the Mega Millions jackpot was won by a man in Ohio. A man in Ohio is doing the winning. This is passive. Number 4, I sent you an email. Subject, verb, object, active. 5, the email was sent an hour ago. Number 5 is a trick question. It doesn't have a subject. It doesn't say who is doing the sending. It's passive. 6, Pizza Day is loved by everyone. In other words, everyone loves Pizza Day. 6 is passive. Number 7, the whole team had been waiting for me. Now, this is also a kind of a trick. Had been waiting is a form of past tense. Just because it has a being verb in it doesn't automatically make it passive. The whole team in the past tense was doing the waiting for whom? For me. So this is active even though it's got a being verb in it. 8, the Titanic sank by an iceberg. Now, this is a location word. This is a prepositional phrase. So even though there's the word by here, it's active. Number 9, mistakes were made. This is actually made famous by politicians who don't want to admit who made the mistake. So even though we don't have a subject, passive. And number 10, your application was rejected. Doesn't say who's doing the rejecting, just that it happened. So 10 is passive as well. Now let's try writing. For each of the sentences given, I'd like you to try to write the opposite in passive voice, or at least be able to tell me what the opposite is. So if you want to pause the video and try it yourself, you can do that now. Or if not, take a look at my examples. In active voice, my brother washed all the dishes. The passive inverse would be, all the dishes were washed by my brother. I moved the dishes to the front, brother to the back, and put in some passive being verbs. Number 2, if the passive is, the body of a missing person was found by police today, the active would be, police found the body of a missing person today. So I moved police to the front since they're the subject doing the action of finding. Number 3, scientists discovered a new planet that could possibly sustain life. What did the scientists do? They discovered. Let's move the sentences back to the end and get passive. A new planet that could possibly sustain life was discovered by scientists. I hope that this concept makes sense to you. If you need to, go ahead and rewatch the video now.